In this episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, Dr. Rick Strassman, famed for his seminal work on DMT, engages in a deep and wide-ranging discussion covering topics from ancient prophetic texts to the future of humanity and consciousness. One of the central threads throughout the conversation is the comparison between DMT-induced experiences and descriptions of prophecy found in the Hebrew Bible. Strassman points out that the phenomenology of the two is remarkably similar, drawing parallels between the vivid, often surreal imagery reported during DMT trips, such as flames, angels with multiple wings covered in eyes, roaring sounds, and complex wheel-within-a-wheel structures, and early biblical visions, particularly those in Ezekiel. This psychedelic interpretation extends to major biblical events like Moses' burning bush encounter, which some speculate might have been inspired by DMT-like plant experiences. Strassman emphasizes how such states, described as prophetic visions, might be explained by endogenous or exogenous DMT access. He notes that these spiritual or visionary states could have been central to the experiences interpreted as divine communication or prophecy by ancient peoples. He lauds the Hebrew Bible's original language for its complexity and symbolic depth, revealing details that are lost in translation, and highlights that reading the text in ancient Hebrew enriched his understanding of the spiritual and linguistic nuances behind these accounts. Strassman shares his journey of learning biblical Hebrew, a process that took him years but profoundly transformed his interaction with Scripture. His immersion into the language wasn't purely academic. It fostered a deep imaginative empathy with the ancient world. Strassman recounts spinning wool from goat hair during a period of his life, a practice that unexpectedly connected him to the ancient Israelites described in the texts. Through this hands-on experience, he felt as though he was stepping into the consciousness of people living thousands of years ago, which enhanced his understanding of the biblical narratives, not just intellectually, but experientially. Through Hebrew's root word system, where most words derive from three-letter roots, Strassman explains how the language weaves complex meaning and layers of interpretation in a fluid way, resisting a rigid linear reading. This framework allowed him to see the biblical text as a cloud of interconnected ideas rather than a simple sequence of events. The deep study of first-century culture, language, and ritual provided Strassman with a multi-dimensional perspective on prophetic and spiritual literature. Strassman delves into the mysterious and controversial Book of Enoch, a non-canonical ancient text that describes angels, known as watchers, who allegedly mated with human women and created giants called the Nephilim. He reflects on the inclusion of this text in the Dead Sea Scrolls, highlighting its deeply psychedelic tone and cosmic scope. Although the Book of Enoch wasn't canonized due to its ethereal and, to some, fantastical content, it plays a pivotal role in ancient Jewish thought about the origins of evil and the flood narrative. According to Strassman, the Nephilim were portrayed as literal giants with destructive tendencies that contributed to the corruption of the world, necessitating the flood. He interprets these beings with a mix of literal and symbolic understanding. While some dismiss these accounts as mythology or exaggerations, Strassman entertains the possibility that these giants either physically existed or symbolize otherworldly influences impacting humanity's history. He also notes that debates around their nature continue to this day, and that these stories encourage reflections on morality, violence, and divine intervention. The flood story, as shared between various traditions such as the Hebrew Bible and the Epic of Gilgamesh, emerges as a universal mythologized event, possibly grounded in regional disasters. Strassman discusses the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, notably advocated by researcher Randall Carlson, which suggests that Earth underwent a catastrophic comet or meteor storm approximately 12,000 years ago, drastically reshaping civilizations and potentially inspiring flood legends. He places these ancient texts within a model where the biblical flood was a real geological and climatic phenomenon that resulted in societal collapses. Strassman recognizes the flood as a point of both physical destruction and spiritual reckoning, with the biblical narrative framing it as God's displeasure with humankind's violence and corruption. Linking modern scientific theory with Scripture, Strassman paints a picture of the flood not just as myth, but as a profound turning point in early human history. As a pioneer in psychedelic research, Strassman candidly explores the spiritual potential and limitations of psychedelics, particularly DMT. He recounts how his own studies disrupted prior expectations, such as the assumption that DMT experiences align with Buddhist enlightenment's no-self state. Instead, he found that many encounters preserved personal identity and were filled with rich, interactive content that didn't neatly fit into existing spiritual models. He emphasizes that psychedelics don't create new information, but rather amplify or reveal latent aspects of consciousness, perhaps tapping into an inner visionary realm that has been interpreted religiously throughout history. Strassman also warns of the pitfalls of spiritual narcissism that can arise when users become overly identified with psychedelic states, referencing cases where individuals develop messianic delusions after intense use. He advocates for careful, respectful engagement with these substances, underscoring that the psychedelic's powers require ethical frameworks and appropriate contexts. Transitioning from ancient spirituality to contemporary issues, Strassman and Rogan discuss the rise of artificial intelligence and other technological advancements, drawing parallels between biblical prophecy and modern-day ethical challenges. Strassman speculates that future messianic figures might not be human, but artificial or digital intelligences born from technological progress, suggesting AI could embody a new life form evolving beyond biological constraints. He contemplates the ethical ramifications of AI surpassing human cognitive abilities, noting our need to craft compelling arguments about humanity's value to coexist with superior digital consciousness. The conversation highlights fears and hopes regarding AI as a potential agent of either enlightenment or destruction, emphasizing the importance of spiritual and ethical grounding in an increasingly complex technological landscape. Strassman reflects on the moral core of the Hebrew Bible, emphasizing two foundational principles: the belief in one God and the practice of the Golden Rule. He interprets the biblical commandments less as rigid rules and more as descriptions of cause and effect designed to promote societal well-being and spiritual closeness to God. This ethical monotheism, he argues, remains relevant as a guide for human behavior despite scientific and philosophical changes. He wrestles with the origins of good and evil, angels and demons, suggesting these concepts embody real forces that humans struggle with internally and collectively. Such dualities underscore human nature's complexity and our capacity for both kindness and cruelty. Strassman sees these teachings as tools for self-awareness and societal cohesion, rather than mere ancient superstition. During the conversation, Strassman openly discusses addiction, the opioid crisis, and mental health, drawing attention to modern medicine's successes and failures. He acknowledges the role of substances like morphine in pain management, but also recognizes the risks of dependency and abuse. His personal reflections include stories of observing addiction and recovery, emphasizing the need for compassionate, comprehensive approaches to health challenges. He thoughtfully explores the benefits and drawbacks of pharmaceuticals such as SSRIs and newer drugs like Ozempic for weight management. Strassman stresses the importance of systemic lifestyle changes, including exercise and diet, as foundational to healing and well-being, while recognizing medication's role as potential aids. His perspective balances skepticism with pragmatic empathy. Strassman contemplates the biological and spiritual evolution of humanity, particularly the dramatic increase in brain size over millions of years. He posits that this growth coincides with the emergence of the human spirit, the capacity for divine communication, moral understanding, and heightened consciousness. This evolutionary leap, he suggests, enabled the complex spiritual experiences chronicled in religious traditions. He also considers practices like Kundalini yoga and holotropic breathwork as natural paths to accessing altered states resembling DMT experiences without external substances. This signals potential innate capacities for spiritual awakening embedded in human biology. The discussion situates human evolution not just in biological terms, but as part of a larger trajectory toward expanded consciousness and interconnectedness. The conversation touches briefly on unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, and alien experiences, with Strassman expressing skepticism about personal sightings but acknowledging the enigmatic nature of many such reports. He references the works of psychiatrists like John Mack, who studied abduction narratives, drawing parallels to DMT visions and the psychedelic state. Strassman suggests that beings encountered in altered states might represent internal or external realities that challenge conventional understanding. He considers the possibility that these experiences point to layered dimensions of reality or unknown consciousness phenomena, blurring lines between mythology, experience, and physical existence. This speculation invites open-minded inquiry into mysteries at the intersection of spirituality, psychology, and science.